While you were busy throwing birthday parties for Steven Seagal and Haley Joel Osment, Taito was quietly uploading full-motion video games to Steam. You heard me right. Both Time Gal and Ninja Hayate, which you might also know as Revenge of the Ninja, are back, and now they've got an HD makeover. While American gamers missed out on the LaserDisc version in the arcades, we did get Sega CD ports in the early 1990s. With these new versions available to buy, I wondered what the reception was like back in the day. To answer that question, I decided to flip through the pages of Electronic Gaming Monthly, GamePro, Hyper, and more classic magazines to see what the critics said back when these games first came out. Prepare to jump through time and be a ninja in this episode of Taito Review Crew.
For those who purchased something other than a Sega Genesis,
yeah, that's it.
our sincere condolences.
What a waste.
When you start with a Genesis, you can always add a Sega CD. And new Genesis 32X. Everything else is cold and stiff.
Burial or cremation?
Burn it.
Welcome to the next level.
As Sega was gearing up to release their CD add-on in the early 1990s, publishers were scrambling to come up with software for the new system. More specifically, they wanted games that would take up a majority of the compact disc, justifying the leap to optical media. Sega, for example, chose to revisit some of the full-motion video games created for Hasbro's aborted ControlVision system, like Night Trap and Sewer Shark. Renovation went a slightly different direction, going after many of Wolf Team's LaserDisc games that populated the arcade for a short time in the mid-1980s. This included the 1984 game Ninja Hayate, which didn't see an American release until a full decade later when it was renamed Revenge of the Ninja on the Sega CD. This came out a full year after the release of several other QuickTime event-style games like Time Gal and Road Avenger. Let's go ahead and see if that had any impact on the review scores. You know, I like to start with Electronic Gaming Monthly because they tend to be somewhere in the middle of the review range. In this case, they're exactly in the middle, with 2 magazines scoring the game higher and 2 magazines scoring the game lower. In a capsule review that apparently speaks for 5 different critics, Mike writes, essentially a Dragon's Lair type action game. This is more of a treat to watch than to play. The game could provide a few more continues, and your skill will rely more on memorization than anything else. Nice animation, though. EGM ended up giving Revenge of the Ninja an average score of 6.4 out of 10. Now that's not too far off from Sega Vision's, which went a little bit lower with a 3 out of 5. However, it was the Australian magazine Hyper that gave it the lowest score, and it wasn't even close, giving it a woefully low score of 32%. Brian Costello concluded that Revenge of the Ninja is just a revamped Dragon's Lair with a ninja rather than a knight playing the main role. You've got 4 directions and an action button. You have to hit them at precisely the right time. This leads to frustration as you watch the same scene over and over again. Sometimes you'll be given multiple choices that leave you guessing which way to turn, but this does nothing to add to the already shallow gameplay. I really don't need to say much more if you own a Mega CD, as you probably already own either Road Avenger or Cobra Command as it is. If you've got any brains, you'll leave it that way. If you really want another game of the same type, maybe Dragon's Lair is the better bet. Maybe Wolf Team, the fools behind Revenge the Ninja, have lost the plot. With Time Gal, Road Avenger, and Cobra Command already on the shelves, there's just no need for another interactive cartoon. There are better Mega CD titles on the way, but it's the familiar case of hanging in there and waiting for them. Revenge of the Ninja is a pointless waste of time. Going back up the scale, we see Sega Power give the Ninja game a so-so score of 68%, which is just a few ticks higher than EGM. GamePro ended up being more generous, going as high as a 3.5 out of 5. Dragon's Lair is the standard that point-and-click graphic adventures aspire to. and Revenge of the Ninja doesn't get that far. But even with Dragon's Lair, once you're done, you're done. If you like these types of games, you won't be disappointed. If you don't, well, disappear into the night before the game finds you. Well, I don't necessarily disagree with GamePro's opinion here. It's certainly weird to hear them call Revenge of the Ninja a point-and-click graphic adventure game. I mean, that's usually associated with games like Salmon Max and Monkey Island and Shadowgate. You know, actual point-and-click adventure games. Somebody really needs to invent a time machine and go back to 1994 and introduce GamePro to the term QuickTime event. Not that it would change the overall average, which sits at a mere 59%. Not good.
Welcome to the next level!
Hey! Is anybody out there?
How could you let that happen?
Pretend it's a game.
Much like Ninja Hayate, Time Gal was an arcade LaserDisc game from the mid-1980s that didn't come to America until years later. First released back in 1985, this QuickTime event-style game has arguably the coolest premise of any of these full-motion video titles. It stars Reika, the Time Gal, who jumps through literally thousands of years of history in order to save the future or something. As an animated movie, Time Gal is great. I mean, we see her fight through a world war, survive a gladiator, and even battle dinosaurs, all in just a few minutes. You never really knew where you were going to go next, and there are an impressive amount of time periods to explore, all of which tend to feel like bite-sized vignettes. Let's see what the critics said about this early generation Sega CD title. Now, I want to shake things up a little bit for Time Gal. Instead of starting somewhere in the middle, let's go ahead and go all the way down to the bottom of the review scale, where we see Mean Machine Sega twice. Okay, let me explain. When Mean Machine Sega first reviewed the game in their 9th issue, they gave it a 63%, the lowest score of any English language magazine. Gus summed it up this way: Wolf Team's experience in full motion video seems to improve with every attempt. Road Avenger and Cobra Command look very impressive, but ran jerky and had an overall fuzziness that has been left off Time Gal. Although the image only takes up the central portion of the screen, the ingenious perspectives and effects make it burst out of the frame. The two bugbears of all interactive cartoon-type games remain. There isn't much to do, and it isn't that big. Most game players won't be satisfied with the reaction test gameplay, however interesting the accompanying visuals. Even worse, Time Gal is a pushover compared to Cobra Command and should be completed in a day. It's a great shame that the ingenuity and humor of Time Gal is let down in this way. Now, just a few months later, when Mean Machine Sega published their Essentials review guide, they ended up going even lower, giving it a 50%. But that doesn't count. We're gonna go with what the critics originally said, not their revised opinion after the fact. As we begin our ascent up the review scale, we see Megaplay give Time Gal a so-so 67%. Video games and computer entertainment, on the other hand, rounded up to a 7 out of 10. After chronicling the different time periods Time Gal fights through, Chris concluded his review by saying, "If you liked Road Avenger, loved Dragon's Lair, have an off-the-wall sense of humor, and a soft spot for bizarre Japanese animation, not to mention a weakness for psychotic gun-wielding green-haired babes who show a lot of leg, then this is the perfect game for you. And if it sounds like the above description fits only an elite group of gamers, well, a year ago I would have agreed, but I have a funny feeling that a lot of people are gonna like Time Gal. I know I did." Now you're gonna find that the 70% range is where most of the critics landed. Sega Power gave Time Gal a 71% in their 45th issue, while Mega gave the exact same score in their 5th. Sega Force went one tick higher, going with a 72%. And that finally brings us to Electronic Gaming Monthly, whose average is a not too shabby 7.5 out of 10. Martin was the one and only EGM critic to not give the game an 8 out of 10, instead preferring a 6. Maybe it's just me, but I don't care for this type of game. The graphics are very good and have cartoon quality. The animation is very impressive, and fans of Japanese animation will love it. The gameplay is nothing more than memorizing which direction to press and the overly short levels. Fake Ninja Sushi X agreed with the majority, giving it an 8. Time Gal is a Sega CD title. Thanks, Renovation! I liked the Mega CD version, and I'm happy to see the same crisp graphics, solid control, and intriguing adventure is still intact from the translation. I expect to see several games of this format soon, and I hope all of them take a lesson in good programming from this. As we near the top of the review scale, we see Game Informer go a little bit higher than EGM, giving it a 7.7 out of 10. Die Hard Game Fan liked the game even more than that, going all the way up to an average of 89%. It's a big leap. However, it's not the highest score. That once again belongs to GamePro, who went with a perfect 5 out of 5. Let's see if they called it a point-and-click adventure. This game will keep you entertained, but not forever. Appropriately, Time Gal challenges your sense of timing, but once you get the hang of it, you'll likely whip through the game. However, during the ride, you'll see and hear the best that the Sega CD has to offer. For now, if you're looking for a boy toy, check with Madonna. But if you're looking for a gal pal, this is it. Oh, how I love GamePro's puns and pop culture references. It's also crazy to think that a magazine gave, of all games, Time Gal a perfect score. I mean, I own it and I like it, but come on. With an overall average of 76%, Time Gal is really at the top when it comes to this style of quick time event games. Despite some solid scores, this is a genre that largely went away after developers switched to polygons. These days, if you're buying either Time Gal or Revenge of the Ninja, it's going to be for the nostalgia. You're definitely not getting them for the gameplay.
Here's my mind goofing off. My mom says it probably looks like some vegetable, but no plan could be so smart as to pick one machine that plays Sega Genesis and Sega CDs. That's the JVC XEye. She could care. Put your mind to work, she says. I say XEye comes with Compton's Interactive Encyclopedia. Hey, it's a CD player, plus you get stuff for free. So now it's see what you can do when you apply yourself? One mind, one machine. XEye Multi-Entertainment System. Call 1-800-JVC-XEye.
Hey, thanks for watching me break down these classic reviews. If you liked what you saw here, then you should know that we post episodes just like this one every time classic games get added to modern consoles. Now, here's the question I have for you. Is this type of full-motion video game fun? I'm talking about Dragon's Lair, and Space Ace, and Road Avenger, and of course Time Gal. Are you a fan? Are you gonna actually buy the new remasters? Let me hear your thoughts in the comments below. In other news, we're going to be back later this week with more reviews and a magazine matchup. While you wait for that, I strongly recommend you click that subscribe button and support what we're doing here. Until then,